Welcome to the Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dellis. On this episode, we get into the Halloween spirit by looking at the ghosts of various cultures, examine how we're still judged even in the afterlife, and the important role that dogs play even in death.
Every culture around the world believes in some sort of ghost, spirit, or soul that leaves the body at death to go to some sort of afterlife. The details of each culture's description of afterlife varies, but there are some things that they all have in common. 1, an afterlife exists, and often there are levels. 2, there are rules for coming and going that are usually enforced by a god or goddesses. And 3, the dead are supposed to stay there unless they are given permission to leave by said god or goddesses. Of course, we've all heard many of the stories about ghosts that leave anyway, but even if they get permission, a live person seeing a ghost has not very often been a welcome experience or even a good omen.
Let's look briefly at how some cultures describe their Listen, we're not going to be brief. I got to tell you right now. I don't know why I just said that. We're going to just look at how some cultures describe their afterlife. In ancient Mesopotamia, the afterlife was beneath the earth. The souls of the dead, no matter how good or bad you were in life, lived in darkness. They ate dirt, and they drank from mud puddles. The Dark Queen Ereshkigal ruled over the afterlife, and no souls were allowed to leave for any reason, although some did in order to complete a mission or right some kind of wrong. When this happened, the living ended up getting sick, similar to like how we would think of a demonic possession today. Mm-hmm. And sickness meant they were being punished by either the gods or the ghost. So the doctors would come in and try to get the sick person to admit some kind of sin or wrongdoing that would make the ghost attack them. Afterward, the doctor would administer spells to get the ghost to return to the afterlife, which is basically like an early form of exorcism, possibly the first type.
People began coming up with ways to take care of the unwanted guest and hopefully send them back to the land of the dead. For example, in the 19th century, the British Museum acquired a clay tablet from ancient Babylon circa 1500 BC that is part of a guide to exorcising a ghost. The really cool thing about it is that when you look at the tablet, it doesn't look like there's anything on it. But when you hold it at a certain angle under a light, you can see the image of a male ghost being led back to the afterlife.
That is so cool that they even knew how to do that type of thing. It's almost like invisible ink.
I know.
You know?
That's so cool.
Ancient invisible ink.
And then it's also really cool that somebody saw it. Someone was just like doing whatever and they're like,
oh, they had it in the museum for like so long. And it was just randomly somebody looked at it and was like, wait a minute, what is that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Turned on a light to see if they could see something better, and an entire image appears.
That's crazy.
The tablet directs an exorcist to make a figurine of a man and a woman, prepare 2 vessels of beer, and then at sunrise, bury them both in the ground as a series of words are recited, calling on the Mesopotamian god Shamash to take the ghost back to the afterlife. Once the ritual is complete, the ghost will have left the living person's body, entered one of the figurines, and hopefully have been taken back to the afterlife. What'd they do with the beer? They just drink it? Let's just say they drank it. It's part of the ritual.
I don't know. I'd probably pour it on the ground over the figurines, maybe.
Wasting the beer? Maybe. I think they drank it. I think the priest drank it. That's what I think. That's what I would do.
In ancient Egypt, the souls of the dead went on a journey before being allowed into the afterlife. And this journey was Judgy, literally. The dead person's soul had to first go to the Hall of Truth, where Osiris and 42 judges would weigh the person's heart against the white feather of truth. If the heart was lighter than the feather, they would go into the afterlife. But it was heavier, the heart would be tossed onto the floor and eaten by a monster. And this was not good for the dead person, as it meant the soul would cease to exist. All against a feather.
I know. The feather of truth, though. Whew. I mean, you know. The Egyptian afterlife was unique to each person. It was called the Field of Reeds. I wonder if there were any bats that landed on those reeds.
Oh my God.
See Bat Podcast. Okay. It was called the Field of Reeds and was a mirror image of the person's life on Earth, from the house they lived in to their favorite dog, the trees they liked, everything else. This was done on purpose so they would be so happy to be there that they wouldn't want to go back to the living world. However, the gods would occasionally allow a soul to go back if they were not given proper funerary rites or if they needed to address some sin with the living.
If that happened, the living person would have to explain themselves to the ghost and try to be forgiven. If that didn't work, a priest would be called in to be the judge of the sin. The living person would have to explain what happened, and the priest would perform rituals to force the ghost to leave. No one wanted the ghost to roam the earth, and it was considered a bad omen if they did.
The ancient Greeks sent the souls of their dead on a journey as well to be judged. It all began at death, with the living placing a coin into the mouth of the deceased person to pay Charon, the ferryman, to take their soul across the river Styx. Upon arrival, the soul would have to get past the three-headed dog Cerberus. Remember like him in Harry Potter? He was called Fluffy. Anyway, they would then stand in front of 3 judges and tell them all the good and bad things they did their entire life. Oh my God. How do they remember everything? Like, I would have such a hard time. While the judges decided what to do with the soul, they would be given a cup of water from the river Lethe to drink. And the waters were called the waters of forgetfulness, which made sense because once the soul drank it, they would forget their life on earth.
From there, the judges sent the soul to one of 3 places. If you were a warrior who died in battle, you were sent to the Elysian field, aka paradise. If you were a good person, you were sent to the plain of Asphodel, which was also nice. But if you were a bad person, you went to the dark Tartarus, where you had to work to atone your sins. The ancient Romans believed more in ghosts than the Greeks did, and they appeared in predictable ways and times, usually at night.
The bats. There's so many similarities.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
We should not have recorded the bat podcast first.
The Chinese afterlife is also a judgy journey. The soul crosses a bridge over an abyss, and while doing so, it is being judged. If the soul is deemed worthy, it is allowed to take one last look at the land of the living, and then it drinks a cup of mengpo soup, which causes the soul to forget its former life. Chinese beliefs differ on what happens from this point on. Some say the soul goes to heaven, and others say it gets reincarnated. Of course, if the soul is not worthy, it is sent down to hell. Regardless, the soul is not supposed to go back to the land of the living unless helping a family member in a dream, and if it did something else, it was considered evil.
The Chinese people's belief in ghosts is heavily influenced by ancestor worship and the belief that those dead ancestors have power over the living. This could be good or bad, depending on how the person died or how well the living prepared the funerary rites. On the 15th day of the 7th month of the year, when the veil between the land of the living and the dead is thin, the Ghost Festival takes place, which is similar to the Celtic idea of Samhain and the Mesoamerican Day of the Dead festival. At the Ghost Festival, people leave food and gifts to appease the dead, honor them, and basically bribe them to stay in the afterlife and not cause trouble in the land of the living.
Seems like a good deal. Now, India has various types of ghosts, but one in particular might just be the next new Halloween costume craze. At least for me, I'm going to try to figure out a way to do this year. They're called hungry ghosts, and they look like humans, except their feet are backward, which is meant to symbolize that there's something wrong and the spirit is in a state of unrest. These ghosts only appear if the person dies before their time, and so they try to find a live person to possess because they're hungry for more of the life they were cheated out of. The good news for the living is that it's a temporary possession. Once the ghost has possessed someone for whatever time they were supposed to have left in life, it leaves the body and goes into the stream of reincarnation. Of course, that could mean a week or it could mean 10 years. Either way, it's temporary, so,
Regardless, no one wants to be possessed for any length of time. Apparently, possession and corpse reanimation was and still is a fear in India, and many believe this fear is what has led to most people being cremated. The belief is that if the body is cremated, then the corpse can't come back to life, although it still can possess the living. To protect the living, they burn spices and use amulets and prayers, but no matter if you're a hungry ghost or not, your soul would still be judged according to the things that you did and said during life. It was like a point system. If you did something good, you moved up one. If you did something bad, you moved down two. And when you died, wherever you were on that spiritual hierarchy dictated what type of life you had in the next incarnation.
Oh man, so like if you have more bad things than good things by the time you died, you could be reincarnated as like a rat or something.
Maybe. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of The Good Place, if you've ever seen that, and they talk about the point system.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
It's allowing looking for some prize in the afterlife. So you should be a good person to continue that on.
And
as opposed to like, oh, you're just going to go to hell. Who cares? Whatever. It's
right.
It's like, no, it means something for your next life. I like that.
Right. And I agree. And like it means like if you do something bad, it could still be okay for you if you do more good things in life. Yeah. You know, you could atone for your sin.
Yeah, you can kind of like balance it out.
Yeah. Well, in the Maya culture, a soul would begin its journey to paradise by crossing over a large body of water in the underworld, which they called Ixbalba. I'm totally butchering that word too, and I apologize. Let's just say it's Ixbalba. Oh God, I have no idea. It's spelled Xibalba. So that underworld location that I can't pronounce is ruled over by many lords of the dead who have no problem tricking the soul and setting traps to make the soul get stuck there. Thankfully, though, each soul is accompanied by a dog who helps them navigate the troubled path to paradise, eventually reaching the tree of life, which the soul then has to climb up in order to finish its journey.
Oh, that reminds me of the movie Coco. But it's like, remember there's like a dog and the dog turns into Alebrije?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I love that.
That is cool.
The Aztec also utilized dogs in their soul journeys. When a person dies, they would bury their dogs with them so that they could serve the soul and protect it in the afterlife. It happened often that someone was not buried appropriately, which would cause the ghost to come back and haunt the living instead of possessing a body. In these cases, spirit dogs were asked to find the body of the soul that was not at rest, show it the body, and then lead the soul to the afterlife.
Aw, that's cute. Well, some interesting takeaways for me include the dogs, of course. That's super cute. But also the way cultures that didn't have a connection to each other shared similar beliefs about the afterlife in ghosts and the underworld. Just the fact that they all had ghosts tells me that ghosts are real, right? I mean, come on. I mean, every single culture has a belief in ghosts of some sort. So, I mean, clearly they're real.
Or at least at some point within their history, yeah.
And the judging of the souls, they pretty much all have that belief, which tells me humans have always valued the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, and dark and light. And everybody has been judgy, like, since the dawn of time. That's what I take away.
That's your takeaway, that we're judgy.
Ghosts are real and people are judgy. Even if you're dead.
My goodness. I think I like the way that dogs are helping in the end of some of the ones that we've talked about. And I feel like there's so many ones that we didn't include here, but I think it's just really cool how cultures have tried to understand and, I don't know, give ideas to the afterlife and how people die and what happens when you die.
Right.
And then if something's wrong, like sometimes we come back. But one of my favorite ones was the idea that the person would come back and they would like possess somebody and like get them to like tell the truth. I kind of was like, see?
I would hate that.
Right? But
I
like,
wouldn't want that.
You're kind of like, hey, you know, if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, just because the person's dead, so you can't like kill a person to like hide your secret. Like they could come back and like mess with you.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And then you have to tell somebody what that truth is or they'll keep messing with you.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Well, then be a good person and it won't matter.
Okay, good point.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at The Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at The Unusual History of Everything podcast. And find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for The Unusual History of Everything.